It's common in air quotes, infused with the scent of potpourri, the films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer, a weekly podcast reviewing 2 new or recent release titles every episode with an occasional free-for-all segment at the end that we call Potpourri. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find me and more of my work, I messed that up. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find more of my work, including my written reviews, full episode show notes, and the complete backlog of our episodes and spin-off podcasts at obsessiveviewer.com. You can also follow me on Letterboxd and other social media platforms at the username of Obsessive Viewer. Links to all that is in the show notes of the episode, of course. And if you'd like to support us and get access to hundreds of exclusive episodes that are only behind the paywall, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. I am rapidly approaching 1,000 things on Patreon, so there's a wealth of content there on different tier levels. Recently on Patreon, I did immediate reaction recordings of Novocaine, Mickey 17, and recently this week I did one for Opus, the new, I think it's A24 movie that is in theaters now with I can't remember how to pronounce her name. Jesus, because I'm doing it as Potpourri this episode. Aya Edibiri. So anyway, that's on Patreon, and I'm also reviewing Severance Season 2 episode by episode. I am drastically behind. I'm 4 episodes behind on that, but I'm going to make a dent into that since the season finale just aired today as of this recording. So go sign up on Patreon. Hopefully by the time you get caught up with my Severance reviews, I will have the rest of the season reviewed on there, but it's a blast. Check it out. All of that is available at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. And if you also want to support me without messing with Patreon or just make a one-time donation or what have you, you can always buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/obsessiveviewer, where you can set up a just a regular payment or donation or a recurring thing, apparently. So check it out, buymeacoffee.com/obsessiveviewer. And this week on the show, I am late with the episode. I am so sorry. Usually I try to release these episodes on Thursdays, and the week got the better of me. It is Friday that I'm recording this, and the crazy thing is that the featured review this week was actually recorded last week, so I thought I had a buffer, but unfortunately I did not. So I apologize for the lateness of this, but this week on the show, I'm going to be reviewing the thriller comedy directorial debut of Jimmy Warden, Borderline, which is currently available on VOD in this week's secondary review. But before that, I'm going to go over some movie news and some Indianapolis screenings I want to kind of highlight for you guys before I'm joined by my guest, Brent Leuthold, to review the new action comedy Novocaine in this week's feature review. And we're going to be joined by Brent a little bit later in the episode, but before all of that, I do want to mention that you can follow his work, because I can't remember if I said this when I introed him in the feature review, but you can follow his work at awakeinthedark.com, where he just recently reviewed Black Bag, Mickey 17, and My Dead Friend Zoe. And I believe he's going to be reviewing Snow White this week as well. So check that out at awakeinthedark.com and follow him on Letterboxd as well. Links to all of his stuff is in the show notes of this episode. And yeah, so that's what's on the docket for this week on the podcast. I am glad that you guys are here. I'm happy that you guys are listening, and I hope you guys enjoy this episode. And as such, before we get to the feature review and before we get to the news breakdown, which I have several news pieces I want to talk about, before we get to all of that, I do want to highlight some screenings here in Indianapolis, where I'm recording this, that are playing this week in Indy at some of our kind of specialty or indie theaters that are around, or Some are chain theaters, but just special screenings. So first up, I'm going to talk about the Alamo Drafthouse, which I've talked about several times in the past on this podcast. But in addition to the wide release screenings that they're having this weekend, they are also showing Lost Highway and Hoosiers, and they're having, I believe, a movie party screening of Marie Antoinette this weekend. So that's this Saturday and Sunday. They're showing Lost Highway, Hoosiers, Marie Antoinette, and a bunch of other movies that are in wide release, of course. And I want to mention that on Sunday, this Sunday, March 23rd, at 6 p.m., they're going to be having their second installment of their movie trivia night. That's hosted by my friend and colleague from the IFJ, Lou Harry. That is at 6 p.m. on Sunday, this Sunday. I might go to this one. I didn't get a chance to go to the last one a couple of weeks ago, but I really am, like, I've got plans this weekend, so if my social battery is not completely depleted by Sunday, I'm going to try to make an appearance at the movie trivia night at Alamo Drafthouse on Sunday, because I'm really interested in that, and I need to get to the Alamo more now that I have that, as I've been saying. So really quick, so sorry. I recently bought a new car, a new to me car. So I'm no longer driving a kind of beat up car that I'm afraid is going to break down and everything. So now that as I've been saying the past few weeks, now that I have a big boy car, I can drive to these places. I can go to these screenings and stuff. I can go to special places without fear of my car breaking down. So maybe I'll go to Alamo on Sunday. Hope to see you guys there at Movie Trivia. It's free to play. You can go solo or as a team. If I show up, I will be there solo. So if you guys are there, if anyone's there and wants to join me, please do. I'll hopefully be there at 6 o'clock on Sunday at Alamo Drafthouse. Elsewhere in Indianapolis, we've got the Can. This weekend, March 22nd, they are going to be doing 2 screenings, one for Funeral Parade of Roses and another for Love on a Leash. These screenings are going to be hosted by Vanity Rex as part of their ongoing kind of series with Vanity Rex. Sounds like a lot of fun. I don't know anything about these movies, but from what I understand, it's a pretty cool experience for the Vanity Rex screenings. And then on Monday, they are going to have a couple of screenings, a couple of special screenings on March 24th on Monday. As part of the Butler Contemporary Spanish Film Series, they're going to be showing Pedro Almodovar's Parallel Mothers, and for their for their AV Club screening on Monday, March 24th, they're going to be showing Gamera 3, Revenge of Iris from 1999. So links to the Can and to all of these theaters are in the show notes of the episode, of course. But I highly recommend checking out these screenings just because they're special screenings. They're not tied to, wide releases or even like big releases or anything that are in the big theater chains. Like, these are the kind of screenings and events that these types of theaters exist for. And I would love for them to keep doing them. Elsewhere in Indianapolis, on Sunday at 3 p.m. at Living Room Theaters downtown, they're showing Every Little Thing, which is a documentary about, I'll go ahead and just read the plot summary from IMDb. A woman in Hollywood cares for injured hummingbirds, experiencing personal growth as she witnesses their fragility and resilience. And after that screening at 3 p.m. on Sunday, there's going to be a Q&A that's kind of, I think it's going to be live streamed from, I can't remember where it said it was. I almost want to say Santa Fe, but I don't think that's it. Somewhere maybe in California, maybe Sacramento or San Francisco. I'm not sure. But anyway, there's going to be a Q&A after the screening at Living Room Theaters on Sunday at 3 p.m. for Every Little Thing. And I'm almost done with this, I promise. Over at Keystone Art, which of course is in kind of my backyard, on Tuesday the 25th, they're going to be showing The World's End, which is going to be concluding their Edgar Wright month. And then starting next week, or the following Tuesday, they're going to be doing their David Lynch kind of retrospective every Tuesday, which I think I talked about in last week's episode. And finally, rounding out the screening in Indianapolis segment of this episode is Flix Brewhouse in Carmel. This weekend at Flix Brewhouse, they're going to be showing Interstellar and The Boy and the Heron. I believe these are going to be shown both Saturday and Sunday, maybe Monday as well, but check the theater for confirmation. But they're going to be showing Interstellar and The Boy and the Heron at Flix Brewhouse this weekend, and that is what is playing in Indianapolis this week. This weekend. So unfortunately, I've given you very short notice since this episode is going to be going up tonight at like Friday night. But I do hope that if you're in the mood for a nice like outing to the theater, that you consider checking these out. And I hope to see you guys at the movie trivia at Alamo Drafthouse on Sunday at 6 p.m. So that is what's playing in Indy. Let's go ahead and talk about some news before the reviews. And there is a wealth of news to go over. Well, I've got, 5 bullet points that I'm going to touch on with this. There's some interesting news that's been going on recently, and I'm very thankful that I don't have any celebrity deaths to report on, because that's been a running trend the last couple of weeks. But first up for news before the reviews is that Bob Iger announced I think this was in a shareholders meeting, one of those shareholders phone calls, Disney CEO Bob Iger revealed that Coco 2 is in the works with a planned release of 2029. So it's in its early stages. Coco 2, of course, is the sequel to Coco, which I believe came out in 2017. I loved Coco. I think it was beautiful. It was kind of like, I don't want to say that it was the last like very heartfelt, amazing like Pixar movie, because Pixar has had kind of an ebb and flow. It has kind of lost its luster a little bit recently, and part of that is because they keep just doing their sequels to IP that they have, and like that's it. I miss like the no pun intended. I miss the soul of Pixar, which is just original concepts and everything. And maybe I'm also getting older and I'm just not relating to it as much, which is sad in and of its own self. But I'm not that excited for Coco 2. I don't know what it's going to look like or anything, and it's far away. It's 4 years away. So we'll see what happens, but I just wish that they were doing more original stuff, which, I mean, they have original stuff that's coming out, like Elio, I think is the name of the movie that's coming out this summer. We'll see what that's like, but I don't know. I'm not excited about Coco 2 the way, I'm also not excited for like Toy Story 5, I think is coming out at some point. I'm not really that interested in them sequelizing their stuff. So link to that will be in the show notes of this episode, of course. And moving on to the next piece of news is Severance has been renewed for season 3 at Apple TV Plus, and that is not a surprise one bit. In fact, like when the show has been airing throughout the season 2, like Ben Stiller and the creator of the show, I can't remember the creator's name, Dan Erickson, I think. Dan Erickson. They were talking about how like they have like they're like halfway through working on season 3, like breaking down season 3 and in the process of getting to the point where they're going to be writing it. So that's kind of a means to quell the fears of the fans, because there was like a 3-year wait between season 1 and season 2. And even with that, I'm still behind 4 episodes and I feel stupid about that. but yeah, I'm very excited for this, because Severance is just one of the most interesting and compelling shows that I've seen recently. It's so good. It's so freaking good. Check out Patreon for my episode reviews, which will be resuming, I promise. But speaking of resuming, if that's any good segue at all, the next piece of news I have is that Black Mirror Netflix has released the season 7 trailer and release date for Black Mirror season 7. I have not watched this trailer, because I want to go in blind. I want to be as blind as possible. But I do see like some of the casting news and of course the launch date. It is going to be premiering on Netflix on April 10th, which is incredibly soon. It is incredibly soon. And I really need to bring back Anthology. I've been saying that for months. I need to bring it back. Maybe I'll do something. I don't know, because I need to do the bonus episodes for that. And then maybe I'll do, I have plans. So maybe I'll do that. I'll request screeners. But anyway, Black Mirror season 7 is going to be launching on Netflix on April 10th, and some of the cast includes Peter Capaldi, Awkwafina, Paul Giamatti, Rashida Jones, Chris O'Dowd. I'm excited about that. Emma Corrin and Issa Rae. There's also going to be returning actors such as Kristen Milioti, and I think Jimmy Simpson is going to be in it too. But they're doing like a full-on sequel to USS Callister from season 4, which that is exciting as all hell for sure, because that's such a great episode, and I'm excited for that. And I also saw that Will Poulter is going to be in this season, and I don't think, because he was in the kind of one-off interactive episode, Bandersnatch, that they had for Black Mirror. I don't believe that his role in the show is in season 7 is going to have any connection to Bandersnatch at all, even though I think an actress from Bandersnatch is also appearing in season 7. But it could be, but I don't see how that could happen, because I kind of feel like Bandersnatch was not very successful or very well received. But either way, I'm very excited. Black Mirror is one of my favorite shows, and I am just ecstatic that we're getting season 7. It's very exciting. So that is going to be coming on April 10th, and of course, check out Patreon and Anthology for hopefully it being reawakened and covered extensively on that show. The next piece of news I have is also kind of related to another podcast that I do. So not only is there going to be a new Cujo film adaptation for Netflix, but it was reported this week that Darren Aronofsky is in talks to direct the film. Now, I don't know how I feel about this. First of all, and of course, I mentioned this as in relation to another podcast I do. Of course, I do Tower Junkies with Tiny. We're going to be bringing that back at some point. Tiny's very busy with all of his stuff, and I'm very busy with all of my stuff. But I'm itching to get back into the Stephen King-averse. But either way, the idea of Darren Aronofsky directing a Cujo film is so interesting to me, specifically because I have no idea what that's going to look like. I don't know what that's going to be like. I don't know what angle he's going to approach it from. And I don't know how that's going to look. And that excites me quite a bit, because one of my big things about Stephen King adaptations is that they are like in the olden days, in the past, a lot of the adaptations were just kind of rudimentary. They were just kind of like, okay, this is a horror story, so let's do the horror and not explore anything. And Cujo, the original Cujo movie, is kind of counter to that. It's kind of in the similar vein, but it's very successful and it's very good because the story itself, the Cujo story, is its own kind of like, not necessarily self-contained, but it's this kind of small stature story. And one of the things that, like, in fact, I will even say that the novel Cujo, I'm not really a big fan of. Like, that might be a controversial opinion, but I don't really like the book, because it's the second, I think it's like one of the very early books that King published. I think it was like the third or fourth maybe, but of his published work. I don't know where it is in terms of when he wrote it, because back then he was writing feverishly and everything. I don't know when in the chronology of his written novels this was written, but Cujo, I have always felt is a pretty not necessarily lackluster novel, but it's very much a young King cutting his teeth. It's him really kind of finding what would work and what doesn't work with his kind of voice as a storyteller. And because of that, I feel like there's some ideas presented in it, kind of similar to Salem's Lot, but ideas presented in Cujo that aren't really that fully developed or that fully explored the way that he usually does or would go on to explore very thoroughly. So that's another reason why I kind of am very excited for someone like Darren Aronofsky to take on Cujo, because there's enough wiggle room, there's enough room in the plot of the novel to really let Aronofsky kind of go into some interesting cerebral things and do like what Aronofsky does, which is just kind of examine some weird shit in the story. I'm very much curious to see what this looks like. So I will report on it as news develops and everything. And the final piece of news for News Before the Reviews this week on the Obsessive Viewer podcast is something that caught me off guard, because I don't know that I actually noticed this or was aware of this, but Hulu had, like, back in, I think, like December, back in December, Hulu picked up a pilot order for a new Prison Break show. And it's really interesting because I actually just finished rewatching Prison Break just for fun. And it's silly, it's weird, it's not that good. But it's comfort food. It's comfort food. But this is kind of surprising because, like, there's just a casting announcement for the pilot. So basically this pilot episode, with the anticipation of being picked up hopefully for a full season over at Hulu, it is going to be its own thing, but it's going to be set within the same universe as the original Prison Break series. And it's not... It's not like the news piece I'm reading says that it's not expected to involve the characters at the center of the original show, Michael Schofield and Lincoln Burrows. But there are some casting announcements, including, let's see, what are the names? No one that I really recognize from anything, but Clayton Cardenas, J.R. Bourne, Miles Bullock, and Georgie Flores are all have all been cast. And it's funny because I was reading the kind of the breakdown of the characters, which I think is kind of funny given the given the kind of press release nature of it, but I'll just read them. So Cardenas will portray Ghost, a ruthlessly dangerous inmate at one of the deadliest prisons in America. Bullock will play Darius Red Lewis, an inmate at one of the deadliest prisons in America. Flores will play Andrea, one of the female cadets training to be a corrections officer at one of the deadliest prisons in America. And then finally, J.R. Bourne is going to be playing Junior, a mentally unstable lone survivor of a decades-old prison break that devastated the town. I assume that town is in which one of the deadliest prisons in America is located. But here's the thing. So, like I said, I just recently rewatched Prison Break just for fun, and it's a silly, high-concept thriller show from the heyday of high-concept thriller shows on network television. So this was on Fox. It is very much of that era of, like, 24-style high-concept thrillers and mysteries and everything that were brought about from, like, the success of Lost and, like I said, 24 and other shows like that. Like, one of my favorite shows from that era is this, like, little show... I think that, like, Joss Whedon I think Joss Whedon had, like, some connection to, like, a producer credit to. One of my favorite shows from that era was the show Drive with Nathan Fillion that lasted all of 4 episodes. 4 episodes aired, 6 were made and produced, but only 4 aired, and it's about a cross-country, like, road race, illegal, like, road race across the country, and, like, it was an ensemble cast where each character had, like, something that they were wanting to fight for and wanting to win for. And, like, for Nathan Fillion, it's that, like, his wife was kidnapped and he used to be a getaway driver, so that he needs to get back into the game and everything. But the thing about it was that it was a cross-country show. It was a cross-country race and everything. But in those 4 episodes, they shot the hell out of one very specific, like, road of freeway. And they tried to make it look like other parts of the country. And I thought that was very cute. So yeah. But anyway, having said all that, I think that the idea of a Prison Break show in the current era of not premium cable or anything, but like streaming platforms that don't have like those limitations of content like network television does, I think that could be kind of interesting, but I think that there's a little bit of a balancing act that needs to be done, because I think that if to attract fans of the original series, I don't know if that's the intention, but to attract fans of the original series, I think you have to kind of keep that sort of like overall tone from the original series. But you can go a bit further with this current, like, this current landscape of television. So I think it'll be an interesting balancing act. I don't know. So we'll see. But rewatching the original show, it's silly, it's fun, but like it's very tame. It is incredibly tame, and very much kind of ramshackled, I guess is the word, by network TV of the era. So like there those kind of restrictions, really. So that is it for news before the reviews, and let's go ahead and go into our featured review of the evening. We're going to be talking about Novocaine with guest Brent Leuthold. So go ahead and strap in and get ready to hear us review Novocaine in this already recorded review. Enjoy.
They tell me I view obsessively.
Okay, and joining me for tonight's feature review, there we go, that's the words, those are the words, for the featured review of the new action comedy Novocaine is returning guest Brent Leuthold, who can be found on Letterboxd at the handle of Awake in the Dark, and his writing can be found at awakeinthedark.com. Yeah, welcome back to the show, Brent. It has been a while. How are you doing this evening? And yeah, are you excited to talk Novocaine?
I am. I'm feeling no pain, baby.
Nice. Yeah, so like I said, we're going to go into a feature review of Novocaine. This is going to be a non-spoiler and spoiler review as usual. If you want to navigate around spoilers, check the show notes for timestamps. Those timestamps and show notes are also available at obsessiveviewer.com/OV471. And yeah, Novocaine came out in theaters, was released in theaters on March 13th. I guess technically March 14th. Anyway, in theaters, and the premise is when the girl of his dreams is kidnapped, a man incapable of feeling physical pain turns his rare condition into an unexpected advantage in the fight to rescue her. Directors for this movie were Dan Burke and Robert Olson. Writer was Lars Jacobson, and the cast includes Jack Quaid, Amber Midthunder, Ray Nicholson, Jacob Batalon, and Betty Gabriel and Matt Walsh, credited as Matthew Walsh, which I thought was interesting, and I feel like it's probably...
Is he doing that now?
I guess so, and like, I don't blame him, but it's like a Michael Bolton Office Space thing.
Why should I change these one? Yeah.
Exactly. But Novocaine is in theaters now. I saw it last night as of this recording, and Brent, you saw it a few days ago, I believe. What were your expectations going into Novocaine, and how'd you feel about the movie and non-spoilers?
This is a trailer I feel like I've seen quite a bit this year. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I thought it had a really fun, hooky premise. And yeah, kind of, action comedy sort of beats. It's tough with comedies where you feel like you see the trailer a lot and you're like, oh man, I really hope this isn't the best bits from the movie.
Yeah, I
think probably to a certain extent it kind of still is. But I had a really good time with this one. I think the kind of the surprise, I guess, with me with this one was, I think it is a really pretty well put together action movie. Mm-hmm. I think the actual like sequences and the fight choreography is really good, like really spirited. And I think that they use, again, like the central premise of this movie, that this guy can feel pain. I think the way that they orchestrate, they could do different things with these fight scenes that you wouldn't be able to do normally. The main one in the trailer is the one in the kitchen and has him sticking his hand in a deep fryer to get a gun, which of course you can't normally do that. But there are other instances where they kind of carry that out. And so I thought there was some inventive stuff there, not just from the comedic aspect, but I thought that the way that they sort of constructed those scenes, it was, I guess you could say, not just more competent, but a pretty solid action movie that definitely has, like, it's definitely an action comedy, no question.
Yeah.
But that was maybe a little more the surprise for me. Jack Quaid doing more kind of follow-up work. He was in Companion not very long ago, back in January. I think he's probably even better here. This is maybe a better suited role for him. Companion, he has more of a kind of, he's one of the characters, but he's has more villainous presence. Here he is, has this condition. He is kind of a more vulnerable, sheltered guy, and I think it kind of plays to his persona a little bit better, and just kind of his acting wheelhouse better. So I thought he was great here, and overall good time. It's not reinventing the wheel. There's certain script story things that don't make sense at all, but we'll talk about those. But again, is kind of a surprisingly impressive, action movie. I thought it was quite good.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's so interesting because they have been pushing this in theaters in terms of the trailer and everything a bit. Like, it's been promoted pretty well, but like months ago, I was kind of looking at the release schedule, kind of putting together like, oh, what movies am I going to be reviewing this year on Obsessive Viewer? And like, I saw like Novocaine. I was like, I have no idea what this is. And like, I read the premise. I was like, I haven't seen anything about this. And then suddenly it's like 6 weeks before release, or maybe a couple months before release, it's like it's bombarded with it. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm into it. I have such affection for Jack Quaid as an actor. Like, he's very good in everything that I've seen him in, and like he has this. And I said this word numerous times in my immediate reaction on Patreon, but he has this just charming affability. Like, he is this, like, he seems like a down-to-earth guy. And like, anytime I see him in interviews or listen to him on a podcast or whatever, like, him and a couple other actors that are like currently working now, they're like people that I'm just like, I just want to hang out with him. I want to be buddies with him. He seems like a good dude. But that kind of like likability translates incredibly well to this extremely like vulnerable character who's very sheltered, and he's very closed off because of his condition, and he has all of these quirks and everything that like I didn't really consider going into the movie. And then when it transitions into that action movie, I agree. A lot of the choreography, a lot of the stunt mechanics are really pretty like above competent. Like, it is very, very solid. I didn't think it was breaking any new ground despite the central like conceit of the movie, but I do think that the set pieces are varied enough. There are some pretty clever implementations of his condition in those fight sequences, like you said. And it has like what any good like kind of fish out of water like dude is kind of like just kind of improvising as he goes along thing going for it, and like all of that worked really well. I just felt like the plot, there are some, like you said, script issues or script things that I was just like, it kind of made me roll my eyes, and I just kind of felt like while it wasn't breaking any new ground, what it was doing in terms of the plot, I feel like we can discuss that in spoilers and everything, but like that was incredibly just like rudimentary for me. It was just very basic. And I feel like the impression that the movie gives is that the expectation is that they are going to have this conceit, this concept of him not being able to feel pain to kind of overcompensate for a weak story, like not doing anything. Like the thing that's going to get your butts in seats is to see Jack Quaid and Ray Nicholson duke it out, and see Jacob Batalon doing his like guy in the chair thing. and Amber Midthunder being a damsel in distress. And like, that's what you're going to see the movie for. But like so because of that, they skimped on story and everything. But what I'm kind of getting at in a roundabout way is what they do that's unique and interesting to me. While the choreography is solid and the stunt work is good, very good. In fact, the thing that I was most drawn to is the way that they use that conceit of him not feeling pain as a means to kind of overcompensate or to compensate for like the way they used sound design to compensate for the lack of reaction from him. So like the violence in it is surprisingly like visceral. There's some like crazy cartoon-esque stuff, kind of similar to like The Monkey a couple of weeks ago or a few weeks ago, but it does this thing where it's like, maybe it's because I saw it in a Dolby theater, but like it's like the hits just hit hard, like very, very hard. And it's so interesting because like that's where it stands out for me, because I haven't seen a character who can't like feel pain or anything. So like having the sound compensate for the lack of reaction just kind of really made it a very thrilling experience for me and for the person who was sitting next to me. Like they were really into, like, to the point where it was kind of annoying, but I digress. Yeah.
And I mean, another part of Jack Waite's performance. I mean, he's not doing the typical stage combat thing because he's not, I mean, he still has reflexes. So he, of course, is like still blinking and stuff, but he's not like when he's hitting the ground, like he can get knocked out.
Yeah.
But like he doesn't have the same kind of thing of like the wincing is sort of different. I think he did some kind of fun things in those scenes with his performance that, again, it's really only in this movie that it would work. So
absolutely.
I like that stuff. And, it's Pete. You mentioned Jake Batalon. He's doing pretty much the same character as the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. He is the guy in the chair. He's Jack Waite's character's gaming buddy, who we actually haven't met in real life, because he doesn't go out. Jack Waite's character in this, like, he doesn't go out a lot. He kind of mainly stays in his apartment. So he falls for Amber Midthunder's character, who is, the teller in the bank. He's, assistant manager there. And, I think one of the things I kind of like about this movie is not like, it's not like especially clever in the way it's like subverting these things, but, it sets it up like a very old fashioned knight in shining armor, damsel in distress plot.
Yeah.
And it's not super wink winky about that. At least I didn't think so. But like, that's what it's doing. We'll talk about it in spoilers, but like it's there's a little bit more to that. And I kind of like the way they're sort of investigating that trope. Again, I'm not going to act like this is, some like galaxy brain, investigation of that. But I think for a movie that does, I think, use that trope, pretty seriously, or at least it plays it pretty straight for most of the movie. I think it has the way it ties that up is nice. So I did like that with the story. There's just, there's other things to it. As you mentioned, Betty Gabriel and Matthew Welch play these two cops, and they don't do smart cop things.
No, they don't. And
they're not the smartest cops.
No,
they kind of should. I don't know.
Yeah, and like and here we go. Like, it's very interesting that like last week on the show you were on to talk about Mickey 17, and I feel like this is gonna go into the same direction as that review, because overall I enjoyed this movie. I rated it 3 stars, just like Mickey 17, but there are so many things about it that I just wish was better about it. In particular, kind of similar to Mickey 17, I feel like there was a lot of things that were just not developed enough. And because of that, it just felt a little bit like the momentum of the like violence and action and stuff was enough to sustain my attention span and everything, but I just kind of felt like there are turns of the plot where we'll talk about it in spoilers, but I'm like, and I'm not a type of, I said this on Patreon too, but like, I'm not the type of person who's like, oh, I'm going to figure this out before everything because I'm the smartest person in this theater. But it's like, I want to be surprised. I want to be, invested in the plot and everything. But like toward the beginning of the movie, I'm like, I'm clocking like a major twist in it. And I'm just like, they did not do much work, like hiding this in the least bit. And like, yeah. And it's just, it's really frustrating. And I like Jacob Batalon a lot as an actor. And it's kind of a shame that he's not in this movie that much. Like I kind of expected it to not be a two-hander with him and Jack Quaid, but I think that their chemistry is really great. But it's not as prominent as like the trailer would have you think. So that's a bit of a bummer. But I do appreciate the kind of meet cute aspect of Amber Midthunder and Jack Quaid at the beginning. I thought that was charming, and it had some interesting stuff that I think worked pretty well to kind of drive us through the rest of the movie.
Yeah, if you look at a movie like Hard Eyes from last month, I think that's a movie that's more clever about the tropes that it's investigating than this movie is.
Absolutely.
Where I think it's investigating stuff about rom-coms, where this is more about, I guess you could say, more action tropes, not in terms of the action-y part of it, but the romance subplots within those action movies. So yeah, again, this isn't as clever about that. I thought they had some solid chemistry. Good to see Amber Midthunder in a role like this. Good to see Ray Nicholson being really sinister and scary as anyway. Especially towards the end. I mean, he's a real force. I think this movie too is like it's like an hour 50. It's like definitely something like let's get like 15 minutes off this bad boy. Like let's like even borderline like cut off the cops characters. Just leave them out.
And the crazy thing is it all already feels like a little bit cut down because like there are like big swaths of movie that is just kind of skimmed over. Like when he shows up to get kind of to get medical assistance from a character that we saw previously in the movie, like it's just like a cut to being patched up, and then like he's up to date on everything, and like everything is like he's like, oh, go get your girl and everything, and I'm just like I feel like we missed a scene. Like it feels like there's something on the cutting room floor, which I understand. Like all of that's pretty well established in the other scene that this character is in, but like it's weird because it's just such a pivot, and it feels like it's just meant to be like a moving the plot forward, rather than kind of a resolution to the ideas that were put into Nate, played by Jack Quaid, his head in that earlier scene. And it's just, I don't know. I feel like it could have been a lot better streamlined in terms of the narrative.
Yeah, I think honestly, you could probably just get rid of that whole cop element.
Yes,
and just rework some other pressure cooker element to it. And I like Betty Gabriel and Matthew Walsh, but it's just not, and it factors more in as a anyway. So I think this could have been tighter, for sure. So that's Jacob Batalon I liked in this. There were a couple that were like comic relief things where I just was like, those are clunkers. He has one about Daft Punk that I was like,
oh yeah, that was pretty.
I was just like, man, even Tom Holland wouldn't laugh at that one. Right, he seems like a pretty easy laugh. So, but generally he's fine, and I know what he's doing here, and it works. But again, for me, I think similar to Mickey 17, which we talked about last week, like, this kind of wins on the central performance for me, and I think Jack Quaid, this is probably the best fit that I've seen him in terms of a lead role for like a movie like this, like that's kind of like kind of big theatrical release. And looking at these directors, like two other movies which were Villains and Significant Other, which were both Villains is kind of like, it's kind of like horror, subversive horror comedy sort of thing. Significant Other is more of like art house horror, I would say. I think this is the most successful of those three movies by a good measure. I think they, again, even though there's, I think definitely streamlining that can be done with this like movie overall. Like I think this is their best effort so far. And again, like you said, like hard hitting action and like I think pretty satisfying. Somebody mentioned this somewhere about like, this is kind of potentially hacky for me to invoke, but like the return of the date night movie, because if you look at something like Hard Eyes and even something like Companion, the idea that, you know, in something like this, there's something about, again, we talked about like Knight in Shining Armor and Damsel in Distress. There's something kind of almost old fashioned about the way those movies kind of place themselves. That, you know, I mean, hell, I'll take whatever to get everyone back in the thing, whatever anyone else enjoys, you know, a four quadrant, you know, movies. I don't care. I mean, if they're well done, of course, but, you know, so I think that's sort of interesting that, it would be interesting to track that if there are movies like this that studios are like, let's just try to get everyone back. And, you know, I don't know.
And that's such an interesting point too, specifically because it is, I really love that kind of, I guess, comparison, or that point about it being like a way to bring people back and it being the return of a date night movie, because this is a level of not really subversive stuff or subverting expectations, but it's like Hard Eyes and this, they are date movies. Like they are like a big part of the movies of these movies are the meet cute, are the kind of relationship stuff. And it's just like the backdrop is a specific concept or a specific genre or niche. And like, that's really interesting because it's something that kind of feels like it harkens back to like rom-coms of the past, but having to kind of just add something to it that's a little bit more appealing to other people, I guess. I don't know what I'm saying. I mean, I just like that.
I think it's romance not as a punchline.
Yes.
Right. That these are movies that are communities, but they take the romantic aspects of the story seriously.
Absolutely.
And I think that's welcome to me. And I think that is something that hopefully appeals to people. And I think maybe that's maybe the old fashioned part of it that I'm sort of, sort of thinking about. I remember when this different movie, and I didn't like it as well, but like Anyone But You, when that movie came out, we were kind of talking like, oh, that's like an old school romantic comedy. I think in some ways it is. I think, anyway. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't even invoke that one. But all that to say, I think I think that's an interesting play to have movies that kind of don't just have a toss off sort of romantic plot or subplot. Like it's it's kind of taking that aspect seriously. So
it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Christopher Landon and what he does with like slashers and like horror movies, like bringing in like Happy Death Day or Freaky, having like these different concepts, just like playing with it. Even like a movie that I believe you reviewed with me on OV years ago. Jesus, It's a Wonderful Knife. I think you were on for that. Yeah. Just like these interesting like genre pieces that are combining other elements or different concepts and everything. It's kind of a similar vibe with Novocaine. And as long as like, I also did not have a problem with like the central concept or the central conceit. Like it's a real condition like that real people have and everything. And I think it's done well in terms of being, I guess I would say respectful of people with that condition, but like it doesn't make it that specifically a punchline. It makes his reactions to things, the way that he encounters everything, like the punchline the punchline of the movie is his shelteredness, the way that he interacts with people, and the way that he like interacts with like this criminal like underworld that he finds himself in pursuit of rescuing Sherry. Like, it's this fish out of water thing that I found just very charming, especially because it's built on the back of Jack Quaid's performance, and he is someone who is he's again very charming, very very relatable to an extent, but also like he's someone who he's not like a sad sack character. He's not a sad sack kind of actor. So like,
and he's not just a nice guy in the sense that like it's more than that, because yeah, like you said, it is fish out of water, and he just decides like, and he even says like, what the hell am I doing? As he picks up the gun and like goes after this like on this flight of fancy.
Yeah.
But he's getting in fights with people. He's punching people. He's doing stuff that he can't feel back.
Right.
So like, so he'll say like, okay, well, like, yeah, like I just like ripped up your face. Like,
yeah.
I had to do it, you know, but not only I had to do it, but also like, I don't even know what you're really going through, you know?
Right.
So again, I think that's a fun aspect of this movie, not just because they could have played it that one level of, oh, you can punch this guy a million times, never feel it, you know, but like it's more clever than that. I think it builds it into his character. And yeah, in terms of people with SEPA, I have no idea. I don't know how they feel about it. They mention in the movie that a lot of those people like don't live very long because like, and especially his with the A part, he can't feel hot or cold either. So like he can't even like, he can't have like a chew hot food or also like potentially like bite his tongue. That's a whole thing. And it's, yeah, it's, they show his routine of making smoothies and tennis balls and stuff. And it's just, it's an interesting twist. I mean, you know, like you said, kind of like Christopher Landon, where it's, you're just kind of looking for something different. So yeah, I got it with this one. I liked it.
Absolutely. Do you want to go into spoilers for Novocaine?
Yeah.
All right. And what did you rate it on Letterboxd?
I gave it 3.5. I had a good time. Nice.
I rated it 3 stars. I feel like this will be a movie that I could see myself revisiting and probably bumping it up to 3.5, because it is a fun movie. It is, the energy of it is good enough to compensate for some of the issues that I have with it that I'll talk about in spoilers. So we're going to go ahead and go into spoilers for Novocaine. Once again, if you want to navigate around spoilers, check the show notes for timestamps. Those timestamps are at obsessiveviewer.com/OV471. Now, I'm going to play a clip from the trailer. When we come back, we're going to be spoiling Novocaine.
What's your deal?
My deal? I'm just a regular guy with a regular job, but I've got this condition where I don't feel pain. Hey, there we go.
Oh my god, you're a superhero.
No.
Can you feel this?
Definitely feeling something. Last night was amazing.
Get on the ground! Open the vault! Cops are here early! We need a hostage. Let's go!
Oh my God, what am I doing?
Okay, spoilers on for Novocaine, and really quick, this is a tangent. This is not related to the movie at all or anything, but today I went to Big B and got a drink with Jess, and I have recently, over the last couple of weeks, a few weeks I think, I bought a new wireless microphone just as a like hashtag little treat. It's a Rode Wireless Micro, so it's just on the go recording and everything. So I've been carrying it with me because it's pocket sized, like everywhere, like a security blanket, because I'm weird. But I keep telling like Jess specifically, because I know that it irritates her. I keep saying, like, if we're like hanging out or we're going somewhere, I'm just like, hey, you know, just in case anything goes down, don't worry, I'm packing. And so I went to Big B today and I said it again, and she was just like, I'm going to stop being friends with you. But I was like, look, in case something goes down here, don't like, I'm packing. So, and like, I just pictured like, and I said like, people saying like, everyone get on the floor. And I'd just be like, hang on, can I just get some room tone here? Just to get some room tone here. So anyway, and yeah, and I've also made the joke that, I'm like, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Yeah. Which genuinely,
Your license to carry.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I get it, man.
Like, imagine
Don't have to explain it to me.
Exactly. My former sales engineer. Right. But yeah, it like, I don't know, like my whole thing, and I swear we're going to go into spoilers for Novocaine, is like, if I'm at like a bookstore or something and I see Stephen King, am I going to talk to him and like ask him like question if I can record him on my phone? No, I'm going to use a microphone. Anyway,
anyone else would just use their phone, but not anyone else.
Yeah, it's heavy as the head that wears the crown. But I'm so sorry for all of this. But spoilers on for Novocaine. Brent, I want to talk to you about the plot and how paper thin, like the whole setup is, like just the whole her being in on it, that felt just so obvious, and it really kind of made me roll my eyes just because it just felt like, okay, yeah, this is what's happening. And I think
that he was getting played like,
and like, it just feels like it's not concealed that well, but also it's like, it's a problem of the script in terms of setting up like her backstory, like when they're at the bar and she's talking about like, oh, I was adopted and I was in and out of foster care. Finally, I was adopted, but it wasn't a good family. And, so now I moved and everything. It's like, okay, we get the bare minimum of her backstory. And then like that backstory is contingent, like the plot of the movie is contingent on that backstory that we just got a very small snippet of. And it just felt like it was also the most obvious thing. Like I get it. Like they had the masks off in the car and I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah, my theory's correct. Like, obviously. So I don't know. That was just a small nitpick.
I didn't really think about it.
Oh, really?
No.
Interesting.
I didn't see that coming, either her being in on it or them being brother and sister.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, but yeah, I agree. Like, it doesn't make sense. And that's why I think the cop characters you just cut out, because once we know that as the audience, it makes zero sense why the cops wouldn't be 4 steps ahead.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like that's why I'm like, the only way you make that, if you're going to do that, where she's, their siblings or whatever, like, you have to cut that whole cop element out of it, because otherwise they would already be at that auto shop and all that stuff. So that was the thing to me that, like, I was just like, yeah, like script wise, that just doesn't really work. So like, I didn't see that coming, but I mean, but totally fair enough.
That's fair.
It's not the most well conceived plot twist. I will say so pivoting off of that, probably my favorite scene in the movie is one that is like the stinger at the very end of the trailer, which is, and you don't know the exact context, but it's basically in the context of the movie, he's hanging upside down, the brother comes there and all this stuff. And so he has to wait for Jacob to get there, Jacob Batalot's character to get there. And he has like 5 minutes to kill, basically, so to speak. And so, he's hanging upside down, Jack Quaid, and he's like, well, if you just want to kill me, make it quick. And he knows. I
thought that was clever. I like that.
It was clever. He knows that this guy's going to want to torture him, and he's right. And of course, that's terrifying in any other movie. But in this, you're like, well, you're going to have a tough time with that, bud. And of course, like, we saw this in the trailer. He's like, oh, that one hurt the most. And it's still really funny.
Oh, it's hilarious. Like, he sells it so well.
Oh, absolutely. He's great. It's a great scene still. The only thing, I wish they had done something different with the music. There's actually some really good needle drops in this movie, too. But they go with You Are the Inspiration by Chicago, which we've seen in Deadpool and other movies. And it's, I get the whole having a cheesy pop song for violent stuff. Okay. I just, that was the only thing that was a little disappointing. But it's a really funny scene. And again, it's a subversion of like, oh, Jesus, like, he's going to rip this guy's fingernails out.
Right.
Like, that would be a Syriana moment in any other movie.
And I still winced. I still, like, I closed my eye. I can't do fingernail stuff. Like,
But I love the idea that it's like, oh no, don't torture me.
Right.
And then he's like, I'm going to draw this out. It's that whole way that I thought that was really, really, even though it's in the trailer and it's kind of the linchpin of the trailer, I thought it played out really well. So again, that's an example of like the kind of thing I'm talking about where it's like, and the kind of Wolverine thing that they also have in the trailer where he's punching the car. You don't get that in any other movie. No one is going to rip their hands up so that they can go after someone with shards of glass fists. And so that's the sort of stuff, again, that to me is it's unique in this movie. I mean, you don't see it in anything else. So that's the stuff that ultimately kind of carried through for me with this.
Yeah, me too. And again, the sound design is on top. Like it's like top notch there throughout the movie, really. But like to go back to the cop subplot, like Matthew Walsh and Betty Gabriel, like Betty Gabriel's character has like, it feels like, I have no way of knowing if this is the case, but the way that it plays out, it just feels like they didn't know how to expand on like Sherry and Simon's like brother sister stuff, like the whole backstory with that. They didn't know how to expand on Roscoe as a character to be more prominent, to be kind of Jack Quaid's like man in the chair. And it feels like they didn't know how to expand on a lot of elements of it. So it feels like they were like, okay, well, we need to have a cop subplot. We need to have cops in there. And so instead of expanding on those things, they just threw in this. So like when Betty Gabriel's like, oh yeah, I have a daughter, I would stop at nothing. And then I'm like, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. And then they have to call back to it at the end. It's like, we don't like, he doesn't even know who the fuck her daughter is. Like, it's not, it's just, it feels just like,
and she has to avenge Matthew Walsh when he gets shot. It's just
which
okay,
I also fine. Like. I feel like it didn't seem like he died. He probably died, but like I feel like there's no resolution to that at all. It's just like he shot my partner, so I need to see this through to the end. And I don't know. It just felt very, very poorly put together to kind of create like what appears to be a cohesive narrative.
Yeah, I think you could pretty much just cut those characters out almost completely. Yeah. And I don't know that you'd miss anything in this movie. And I think it ultimately would help it because you don't, again, you don't have that element of like, well, they would already know. If they're related, like they would have figured all of this out if they were even halfway decent cops.
When they find the body in the kitchen, like,
that should be it. They should already be at the auto shop.
Like Nate is able to get the workplace like of it and everything because of his bank connections, and he has to call in like do a social security search and like
whole thing, right?
Yeah, and it's just like that's a lot of work that the cops would be doing twice as fast, and they'd be there. It's just like I don't know, but to kind of do like a compliment sandwich though, another positive thing is the tattoo artist sequence. I kind of loved that whole like, oh, what about like, how would you pronounce his last name? Like, I thought that was
a clever way of trying to interact. And it was a good scene. So fun stuff like that. I think there's just certain direction things and script things that I think they could have pretty easily resolved. But again, I think if the action was not as good in this movie, or like Jack Quaid wasn't in it, again, it's like those would definitely knock things. But I think there's definitely a lot of fun stuff in it, and one of those movies that I think will probably play well on YouTube. Not that that's necessarily necessarily a good thing for movies, but I think like you look at like some of those fight scenes or like that, you're the inspiration scene, and it's like I could see. Yeah, rewatching those like those are fun,
memeable too a little bit. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking. Yeah. Studios got to be thinking about that.
Oh, absolutely.
These days. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Not like sure they have been for years.
Right. But another thing about it that I wanted to touch on really quick is that I thought I was going to find it in that sentence, but I'm going to drag it out a little bit more. But the kind of finale of the movie, like the ambulance chase and everything. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Like this is for no, like a few people are going to make this connection in the theater that I'm making, but I thought it was kind of this is such a reach, and it's not intentional at all, but he does the paddles for the medic thing. I don't know what they're called. I can't think of what they're called.
Defibrillator, yeah.
The defibrillator. And like the kind of punchline of that is he says like, I should have been more clear. And then he does that. And the connection I make, and this is such a long walk for nothing that is of any consequence or matters or anything, is that same thing is done in Scream 4, which I thought was interesting because he's in Scream 5. But anyway, that's, I just like,
See,
even
I
to the,
I haven't seen those two
that's
middle
true.
Screams. Or, 3 and 4. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a slight spoiler for that. Like they use like in Scream 4, it's maybe the worst line, one of the worst lines of the entire franchise by my count. But like they say like,
I
clear.
mean, Jack Quaid has almost certainly seen that movie. So he could have pitched that line for this movie.
Yeah. But
honestly.
I just thought that was a fun little weird connection that my dumb brain made. But yeah,
Could have been intentional.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. When I have a bro down with Jack Quaid, because we're gonna be best friends, I'll ask him about it. But the violence and everything, the visuals of it was really good. The cartoonish aspect of like the final one where it's like he uses his bone to kill Ray Nicholson, like it's extreme, it's graphic, it's disgusting, but it's like a cackling moment for me.
Right.
Yeah.
That reminded me a little bit of like The Punisher, which the scene with the tattoo artist kind of reminded me of a little bit as well. Which again, I mean, this isn't The Punisher, but someone gets a knife through their bottom of their throat in that movie too. So yeah, anyway, but yeah, no, it was good. And I mean, Ray Nicholson is guess is the nepo baby show off here. Showdown rather between those two. But no, but they're both good in this. And I mean, Ray Nicholson, we'll see what kind of career he ends up having. But he's he does the creepy smilers and menacing bank robbers thing very well. So
he does, and he's going to be in. I believe he's going to be in Borderline later this year, right? I think is he?
Yeah, well, I think Borderline's going to be VOD like this week.
Oh, really?
Where I don't know whenever it's coming out, but I think March 15th.
Okay,
so I believe so.
Well, we'll see if that is my secondary review this week. Or not.
There you go. I think that's true. I think that's the case.
Interesting. Releases March 14th. Jesus. Okay. Well, stay tuned for my thoughts on that, possibly. But
more importantly, High Rollers with John Travolta, the sequel to another bank robbery movie, Cash Out, which is awful.
Oh, jeez.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's the one I'm looking forward to the most this weekend, that's above a Steven Soderbergh movie. So
right.
I'm sorry. I'm probably screwing up because we're. Anyway,
no, you're fine.
Up the timeline of this.
Oh, you're fine.
but anyway, lots of fun stuff out.
Nice. Well, if you don't want to be all messed up in the timeline and everything, Patreon got access to this episode fairly early, so you could do it on there. So patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. But anything else we can talk about in spoilers for Novocaine? Any parting thoughts, final thoughts on it?
I don't know. Yeah, I like it. I thought it was a fun. Yeah, I thought it was a fun action comedy, good parts of both. And if you're going to do these action comedies, there is an art, obviously, and a craft to doing the action right. And to my eyes, I have a ton to learn about, action, fight choreography and that sort of thing. But to what I was seeing, I thought the editing and how everything was put together with those sequences was probably better than it had to be, quite frankly.
Oh, absolutely. And
which I appreciated.
Me too. And that's why I'm like, honestly, I'm a bit higher on it than I was for Mickey 17. And I feel like they have similar things kind of constraining them. Both movies do, because like we said,
you just want a movie with two Jack Quaids.
That's what exactly. You want. That's the dream.
I get it.
Because like, what's better than seeing like one best friend on the screen, two best friends. Yeah. But no, it's similar to Mickey 17 in that, like, I feel like the plot, like, there's a lot of really interesting ideas, really good things that are in this movie, but it's also just kind of, it's kind of dragged down a little bit by what I feel is a unfortunately pretty weak script and not really doing much in terms of like creating cohesion and having a lot of like filler stuff. Like in non-spoilers, and then we can start closing this down. But in non-spoilers, I mentioned the widower who he goes to his shop to get patched up, and like I loved that scene in the bank where he's like, it's a good way to kind of like do the save the cat moment with Jack Quaid being like, well, you know, I can hold on to this paperwork so you can pay your mortgage. And then like he eventually like just gives him the money, and like that's good. But like, I love the scene, the line that he says where it's like, you know, it could have been when he talks about his dead wife, he's like, you know, it could have been time doesn't matter. It's just, you know, the hole that was left in my life would have been the same if it was the day we met or now that I lost her. And like, just like as a hopeless romantic, I really like, I thought that was a very good line, but then he just pops up as like this, like just like patching him up, and it's not enough to really kind of continue that for me. So that's a small, like, incoherent nitpick that I had, that it just felt like a lot of the side characters, a lot of the supporting characters were just kind of really underdeveloped on the whole.
Yeah, I think that's fair, especially given the film's runtime.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Well, you rated it 3.5 stars on Letterboxd?
Yep.
Nice. And I rated it 3 stars. Like I said, it'll probably go up to 3.5 whenever I revisit this in the future. But that will do it for the feature review on this week's episode. Stay tuned for my secondary review on possibly, well, you know what it is at this point. I don't need to say it. Like, it's
we don't need to say it.
We don't need to say it. It's, you know, it's the secondary review. But before that, we're going to bid adieu to Brent. Before we do that, can you tell people where they can find you online, and what you're reviewing in the coming weeks? This week that this is dropping, March 20th.
Yeah. I think this is going to be my date with Snow White, sadly.
Yes.
It's going to be the next one. So yeah, we'll see again after this one if I'm going to be still reviewing movies. No, I don't know. It'll be fine. I guess I just know what to expect at this point with those ones. But yeah, probably Death of a Unicorn after that. Should be a good, nice get back to my A24 fandom. So that'll be good. And in terms of finding me, you can go to awakeinthedark.com. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Blue Sky and Threads and Instagram.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me once again, 2 consecutive weeks in a row. Yes, I greatly appreciate it. And I will let you go finish season 1 of The Last of Us. But thank you so much for joining me, and we're going to bid adieu to Brent, and stay tuned for the secondary review of this episode. And before we get to our secondary review, I want to take a quick moment to remind you that if you like the show, please take a moment to follow us on social media and subscribe to and rate the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or whatever your preferred podcast app is. And don't forget to subscribe to the Obsessive Viewer Podcast YouTube channel as well, where you can find the podcast and some video content that I've created over the last couple of years or so. And if you're interested in starting a podcast of your own, you can go to Libsyn and use the promo code OBSESS. When you sign up for a new account, you'll get up to 2 months free depending on when you sign up, and we'll get a commission on it as well. More details on that in the show notes of this episode. And now, back to the show.
They tell me I view obsessively.
So by now, the best day of my life, and therefore yours, will be fast approaching. I love you so much, Sophia.
Tonight is the night I'm proposing. We've been through this before. You don't know Sophia.
All right, and for tonight's secondary review, I'm going to share my thoughts on Borderline, which is currently available on VOD as of March 14th. And the premise, according to IMDb, is a bodyguard protects a pop superstar and her athlete boyfriend from a determined stalker in 1990s Los Angeles. Writer and director for this movie was Jimmy Warden, who previously wrote the scripts for Cocaine Bear and The Babysitter Killer Queen, and this is his directorial debut. And the cast includes Samara Weaving, Eric Dane, Ray Nicholson, Jimmy Fails, Alba Baptista, and Patrick Cox. And once again, this is available on VOD right now, and I'm going to do a non-spoiler review for this movie. And to be completely honest, this is a tough one to review because it is in that very clear line of just okay movies. I ended up rating this 3 stars on Letterboxd, but I didn't give it a heart or anything because this was very dangerously close to being a 2.5-star movie. So, and like going through the credits and everything and seeing that Jimmy Warden wrote Cocaine Bear and The Babysitter Killer Queen. The Babysitter Killer Queen is just awful. I remember vaguely that Tiny and I reviewed it on the podcast, and like I couldn't find anything like really redeemable about it. I thought it was just god awful. Part of that is maybe Mick G coming back to direct it. I think he directed it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. But yeah, it just did not work for me. And Cocaine Bear was a fun gimmick, but it didn't really leave any lasting impression. And unfortunately, I feel like Borderline is gonna fall in that category as well because it is a little bit frustrating. So at the center of this movie is Ray Nicholson, who is having a hell of a couple of years with being in Smile 2 and recently in Novocaine as well, which I just talked about with Brent. Here is this movie is such an interesting showcase of his talent. And it's interesting because of the connection to his father. And what I mean by that is this is about like his character of Paul Durson is this just complete sociopath, like crazy pants, like psychotic, person with delusions of grandeur. He has this fantasy in his brain that he is in love with this Sophia pop star played by Samara Weaving, and that he is someone who, like, they are meant to be together. Not only that they are meant to be together, but that they are together. Like, his fantasy is that she is in love with him and they have this connection. So it's not like a thing of, oh, I love her so much, I'm going to go stalk her and make her mine. It's more of a presentation of like, oh, we're in love together. Tonight's the night I'm going to propose. And like, tonight's the night that we're going to get married. It's really, on paper, it's pretty interesting. And I would even say that it's compelling to a certain extent, specifically because what this movie is doing is it's clearly in some way inspired by like the Joker, the character of the Joker from Batman, not Joker as in like what's his face, like the Joaquin Phoenix movies, the Todd Phillips movies or anything, but more like the Joker as he is written in the comics and as he's been portrayed on film, much like by Ray Nicholson's father, Jack Nicholson, in Tim Burton's Batman. And that is an interesting route into the movie. It's an interesting thing to play in because Ray Nicholson isn't doing like a Joker-esque like imitation. He's not imitating his father. He's making this role his own, and he's intimidating and frightening and scary throughout it. But it is very clear that like he doesn't really have anything outside of that kind of boisterous, like crazy, like turn on a dime, mood swing sort of like killer or stalker persona. He doesn't really have anything aside from that. So because of that, the movie just becomes strictly about him just doing crazy stuff and interacting with people with like this heightened, just like on edge sort of personality quirks. And it's a good performance, but it just feels very like empty, and it doesn't feel like it's really in keeping with the kind of tonal identity of the movie, because this is like a thriller comedy. They do lean quite heavily into the comedy of it all, and there are a couple of decent moments where that comedy meshes with the thriller aspects and the kind of horror elements of it really in a really interesting way. Like the opening, like cold open of the movie ends with an act of violence, and it's like the lead up to that is so disarming and goofy and strange, and it's a good way to just kind of set things in motion, set up a couple of the characters in the movie, and then we get a flash forward to like 6 months later, and it kind of resets, and we see that like once the main plot kicks off, where Ray Nicholson's character has broken out of a sanitarium, and he has like again, it's very Joker, as Gen Z says, it's very Joker coded. It's very much like in line with the Joker. Like he has like an accomplice named Penny, played by Alba Baptista, who is she's basically doing a Harley Quinn thing. And he has another accomplice named JH, played by Patrick Cox, who's just like this big, beefy, like intimidating guy, which is, I don't know if that really correlates with anything with the Joker, but like when you see like Ray Nicholson, he seems like a somewhat unassuming presence. So like having that kind of accomplice being this like bodybuilder, like giant guy is intimidating. It's almost like a bane to his Joker, essentially. So there are just like other like Batman elements to it that's just interesting to me, but it does feel a little bit like it's just kind of playing in a sandbox that it's imitating rather than creating something unique or interesting. The other side of it, with like Samara Weaving playing Sophia, who she is this pop star who is kind of in the beginning stages of this relationship with this professional athlete. I think he's a football player or basketball player. He's a basketball player, played by Jimmy Fails. His character's name is Rhodes, and they kind of have this beginning part of a relationship, and then basically it becomes a home invasion thriller with Ray Nicholson coming in to basically kidnap and marry Sophia. And that element of the movie is interesting enough. Again, it's very light. It's kind of just like a little, it's a little slight, really, is what I'm trying to say. It doesn't really have much going for it. So much so that this movie is set in the 90s, and it's like sometime in the 90s. Like it's not even exact. And I think that plays into the humor of the movie, but I don't know why it's set in the 90s. I don't know why it had to be set in the 90s. There's nothing like just overtly 90s about it. I don't know if it's specifically so that they could avoid technology that would get them out of these situations very quickly. But if it's that's kind of lazy screenwriting, in my opinion, because if it's going to be set in the 90s and it's going to play up this kind of 90s fear of stalkers and obsessive fans going after the people that they're obsessed with, like lean into that, like really dive into that. But it doesn't. It's just, it becomes this kind of platform for a lot of like goofy, jokey, kind of deranged actions by these three people who are enacting the plan that Ray Nicholson is doing. And it just doesn't feel like it's making any statements. It doesn't feel like it's going, it doesn't even feel like it's really swinging for the fences all that much. It's just existing. It's just doing this thing. It's this kind of crisis of tone, because anytime we have like a legitimate like thriller horror moment, it kind of takes the wind out of it when there's like a jokey reference or there's a silly bit of derangement that doesn't land as strongly as a comedy beat. And it also doesn't land as strongly because of that as a horror beat. And it just feels a little bit lopsided. It just doesn't feel like it has like this confident tone, this confident idea at the center of it. And that's a big bummer because the talent involved is really good. Like, I haven't seen Jimmy Fails in a movie. I don't think I've seen him in a movie since The Last Black Man in San Francisco. Which is like, it's great. I think he actually directed the movie too. Like, that's a phenomenal movie. So it's great to see him in a movie again. But it doesn't, like, he just doesn't really, he isn't really given much. Not necessarily. The kind of the focus on the movie really is on Eric Dane's character named Bell. He is the bodyguard of Sophia, and he has this altercation with Paul at the beginning of the movie. And so that kind of brings about this whole, this not redemptive arc, but this sort of like revenge thing, or he failed to do something, so now he must rise to the occasion and succeed in saving Sophia and people. And like, it's all well and good, and Eric Dane does a good job, but there are moments in the movie where the movie is expecting us to be shocked or be surprised by certain turns of the plot, where like when it happens, I'm just like, oh, okay, well, they're doing that in a weird way, so obviously it's going to come into play later as something else. Like, there's not enough fanfare to really make us buy into this plot development. So because of that, I don't think that it's really as we saw it to be. And that's kind of rampant throughout the movie. And it's just kind of, I don't know, it's very competently made despite those flaws in the script and those set pieces. When they're not kind of obstructed by comedic moments, the actual like tension can be kind of okay, but it really just doesn't have that like bite to it. It doesn't have like anything really like driving this as a scary scenario, which like home invasion movies like this, especially with the background of being about like a stalker going after a pop star, that is a very compelling sort of idea at the center of the movie. And because it's not really explored that well, and it's because it's kind of encumbered by this silly kind of Joker-esque satirical over-the-top persona of not only Ray Nicholson's character, but of his cohorts, Penny and JH. They are both playing these heightened, like, criminal, creepy people. And it's effective in some moments, but when it's clashing with the kind of tone, it creates this sort of like with the comedic tone as well as the thriller horror tone. It just kind of creates this like this lack of confidence in the story being told. And when you also couple that with the storyline not really going anywhere too unique or interesting, it just kind of falls flat. And that's why it's basically like a very, 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 very complimentary, like I'm doing it some favors rating it 3 stars because I think it really deserves 2.5 stars. But I gave it 3 stars because, I mean, Samara Weaving is fantastic. She's a great like scream queen in the horror genre. She's kind of that kind of new era of scream queens. And I love it. She's great. And the performances across the board are compelling and good and solid. It's just that the script is pretty weak, and the thing that makes these performances strong is that they are doing a lot of heavy lifting for a script that isn't really doing them much in terms of favors. And so that is what I think of Borderline. Your mileage may vary. Let me know if you see it. Once again, I rated it 3 stars, a very gracious or merciful 3 stars, because it really does deserve 2.5 stars. But it's just okay. It's just okay. You might enjoy it if you like this kind of genre movie thing, but don't go in with your hopes too high, because it's really not that good. So that's Borderline. It is on VOD now. I'm sure it'll be streaming at some point somewhere in the future. We'll see if and when that happens. But that is my review of Borderline. Once again, let me know what you thought of it if you do see it. And yeah, so that is almost it for this week's episode of The Obsessive Viewer. I am going to do a solo potpourri section, so if you guys will indulge me, I'm going to share some thoughts on a couple of movies that I watched recently. And then we'll close out the episode for the week. So if this is your first time listening, Potpourri is the section of the podcast where we wind down, we share our thoughts on stuff we're looking forward to, things we've watched, things we're looking forward to, whatever we want, as long as it smells good. And as I am the only one here on the mic, I am going to go ahead and go first. It's a round robin style, so I'm going to share my thoughts on two movies, and I think I'm going to throw in a TV show that I will throw in now. So for my first potpourri, this will be very brief, but I watched the first episode of Yellowjackets. Yellowjackets is season 1 is streaming on Netflix, and seasons 1 through 3, which I think season 3 is currently airing, are all on Paramount Plus. But basically, from what I saw from the first episode, is that Yellowjackets is a drama, thriller, mystery show, very much in line with like Lost, and with what appears to be very heavy influence from like Lord of the Flies. It is about a plane crash that involves a high school soccer team in 1990 something, in the 1990s, maybe 1990 itself. I'm not sure. But anyway, no, I think it's like 95. Who cares? In 96. So this plane crashes and the girls are stuck there, not on an island, it's kind of in the wilderness, but they are stuck there for 19 months, I think. And the movie does a dual, or the show does a dual kind of narrative thing where we have flashbacks to the time that they were stranded, that they were in a position where they had to fend for themselves, and the present day where as adults they are reckoning with like a journalist trying to uncover like what really happened while they were gone. And I've got to say, I've only watched the pilot episode, but this was really one of the best pilots I've seen in a while, in a good while, maybe since like Severance. But talk about a pilot episode that has really like just dug its hooks in me. Like, it's so much so that I really need to finish Severance and finish my reviews so that I can just dive into Yellowjackets, because this seems like the type of show that is just tailor-made for me. It is very much in line with Lost. Like, it's very reminiscent of Lost, not just because it's like flashbacks and flash forwards and stuff, and it's about surviving after a plane crash and all that. Like, not only that, but just like the sense of mystery, the air of mystery surrounding it. Very much has that kind of J.J. Abrams mystery box, kind of Damon Lindelof mystery box thing for Lost. And that's very compelling and very interesting to me and makes me very excited to check it out more. But I don't know, it's very interesting. Like, the way that it's uncovering the story of like them being stranded, the things that are shown in that first episode just has my mind reeling, has my mind like working overtime. I'm very, very invested to see where it goes. And that's the other thing. This is a tangent, but I'm here alone. So here we go, guys. It's also an example of me, who I am as a person. So like, watching Yellowjackets, the first episode, I was like, oh, it'll be really good. This'll be a good thing for me to dive into after I finish Severance. So because I can just binge watch the show, really get into it, not have any kind of commitment to record about it or review it in any capacity. Just like, this will be my treat for finishing my Severance reviews. And then about halfway through the first episode of Yellowjackets, I was like, fuck, I could really do episode reviews on Patreon for this. So that's where my brain is. It's, who knows? I probably won't do that, but Who knows? But anyway, I really enjoyed the pilot episode of Yellowjackets. I will watch more of it in the coming weeks after I finish Severance, but that is my vague thoughts on Yellowjackets, the pilot episode, which again, season 1 is streaming on Netflix, and the first 3 seasons, third of which is currently airing, is on Paramount Plus. So that's my first round of potpourri. My second potpourri is for a new release movie that I saw in the theater. It's Opus, starring Ayo Edebiri, John Malkovich, and Juliette Lewis. The plot summary, courtesy of IMDb, is a writer travels to the compound of a pop icon who disappeared years ago. Surrounded by his cult of sycophants as well as a group of fellow journalists, she soon discovers his twisted plans for the gathering. Much like Borderline, Opus was just kind of just a drag to me. It is very much in line with movies and stories like Blink Twice and Get Out. And it's very much drawing inspiration from those movies to a fault, to the point where it doesn't really feel like it has much going for it in its own like identity. And it's also a bit like Heretic, a more recent movie. Well, I guess Blink Twice came out around the same time, but who cares? But it's very similar in plot to Blink Twice, and the kind of charismatic and haunting performance of John Malkovich in this movie is similar to Hugh Grant in Heretic. So there's some correlations to be made there. But the thing is, this movie isn't doing much in terms of creating like a sensible story for like or a compelling narrative for the kind of mystery or thriller aspect of the movie overall. And that's a bummer because the talent involved is great. There's some really strong, talented people in this movie. And like Ayo Edebiri does a great job in the movie. And John Malkovich is really playing up that deranged sort of like cult leader position in the movie. And like those elements work, but my issue with it is that the kind of grand like scope of the movie, the actual like reason behind like the plan of this cult and like their position is kept so like close to the chest in the movie that by the end of the movie, by the time we get to the climax of the movie, it's not really revealed or really explored that well, because and then there's like an epilogue to the movie that basically ties everything together in a way that I really wish it had been built toward that a lot better, because the ideas presented in that kind of epilogue to the movie are really interesting themes and ideas that I really wish would have been explored a lot better throughout the rest of the movie. So instead, it just feels like we get this Cliff Notes version at the end of it that feels like the movie is trying to explain what it was trying to say in the preceding like hour and 20 minutes. And it's just kind of like telling us it directly in the last 10 minutes as if this is a big shocking revelation, when in reality, it's just this kind of like, yeah, okay, I kind of got hints of that, but it's cool. I kind of wish that there was more to it than that. Okay. And roll credits. It's like, it's kind of lame. It doesn't really work all that well. So that's Opus. It's in theaters now. I have an immediate reaction on Patreon for it where I think I maybe talk about it a little bit in more detail, but probably not, to be completely honest, because there is not much going for it, or there's not really much to talk about with Opus. So if you saw it, I would like to know your thoughts on it. Again, it is in theaters now, and I'm going to round out my potpourri for this week's episode with a brief talk about the 2004 crime thriller that I watched called Twisted, which is a movie starring Ashley Judd, Samuel L. Jackson, Andy Garcia, David Strathairn, Mark Pellegrino, and Titus Welliver. And the plot summary, courtesy of IMDb, is Jessica, whose father killed her mother and committed suicide, is a police officer. While investigating a murder, she finds herself in the center of her own investigation when her former lovers start being murdered. This movie was garbage. It was like, I don't know what is compelling me to watch all of these like early aughts and late 90s like detective thrillers, but this is like bottom of the barrel. By the way, I ended up rating Opus 2 stars on Letterboxd, and I ended up rating Twisted, I think 1 star. Yes, 1 star on Letterboxd. It's like atrocious. I kept thinking throughout it that the best thing about Twisted is, like, for the Lost fan in me, it was really cool to see Mark Pellegrino and Titus Welliver's names side by side in the opening credits. That's the best thing I can say about it, because they played very pivotal roles in the last couple of seasons of Lost, and I loved seeing their names on there. I had no idea that they were in this movie together. Aside from that, the plot is very dry. It is shocking to me that this was in 2004 and not like mid to late 1990s, because it really feels like one of those like cookie cutter 90s thrillers, that the kind of movies that you saw your parents rent from Blockbuster and just like could not give two craps about as they watched it after your bedtime. Kind of the inverse of like my thoughts on Juror Number 2 from last year, which that was a nostalgic thing. Here with Twisted, it's just like there's nothing really going for it. And a big part of that is because throughout the movie, these victims keep popping up. And as the victims pop up, it's like becoming clear that there's a pattern, that these people are former lovers of Ashley Judd's character. And like the way that that's utilized, the way that that's explored is that she goes and hooks up with someone and then they end up murdered. Like, it's not like it's going deep into her past or anything. It's like she's just hooking up with people and then they're ending up dead. So when the movie introduces a new character or a new victim to the plot, it's kind of just the same thing. And I can kind of understand why they would do that, specifically because the movie is the plot of the movie is that Ashley Judd keeps like blacking out. So she starts to believe that she's the one that's committing these murders when she is blacked out. And that's why the connection is there, which it's funny because one of the Letterboxd reviews was something to the effect of, but why was Ashley Judd still drinking the wine? Because it was a thing where like every night she would drink like a glass of wine and suddenly feel like she was gonna pass out, and then she blacks out and wakes up to learn that one of her lovers has been killed. One of the people that she has recently hooked up with has been killed, and she does this numerous times. And it's like the movie is so frustrating because it does not even attempt or even seem like it's aware that it should attempt to differentiate the circumstances of these victims and of these crimes. And because of that, the movie is just so haphazard and so sloppy, and any attempt at like characterization or any chemistry between the characters is just completely not working at all. And there's a twist at the end of the movie, as there is with these types of movies for sure, but it is very just hacky. It's very sloppy, and it just does not work really in the least bit. And I was so happy when this movie stopped playing, like when the credits rolled, because it was just not, it did nearly nothing for me. And it just, I don't know why I'm going through all of these like early aughts and late 90s thrillers, but Twisted is a new low. Worse than The Bone Collector, that's for sure. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks. So those are my thoughts on Twisted from 2004. And that's it for this week's episode of the Obsessive Viewer Podcast. Once again, thank you so much to Brent Leuthold for joining me for my review of Novocaine. Again, you can follow his reviews and his work at awakeinthedark.com and follow him on Letterboxd at the handle of Awake in the Dark. Links to all of his work is in the show notes of this episode, of course, and that will just about do it. So I'm going to start playing myself out, And as always, thank you so much for listening, and make sure to follow the show on social media and subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast app. Also check out our other shows, Tower Junkies, which is a Stephen King podcast hosted by Tiny and myself, and Anthology, hosted by me. Next week on the show, I'm planning on reviewing the Alto Nights and Ash, so join me then, and until then, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. And now, enjoy this short clip from a recent Patreon-exclusive episode. For the full episode and more Patreon-exclusive content, sign up at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. To an extent, that it's an interesting blueprint for a movie. It's an interesting avenue for a movie to go down, but it also just kind of seems a little bit tired at this point, and what this movie does is it doesn't do anything particularly unique or interesting with that kind of premise. It does attempt to do some interesting things, but they don't land as much as any other example I can think of. like I said, the Midsommar stuff, that is a really interesting, unique take on this type of claustrophobic isolation thriller horror movie. With this, what they attempt to do is kind of turn it into this, not even necessarily commentary, because it's not really a social commentary or anything, but they try to make it be sprung out of fandom or love of artists and recording artists in particular, music, the creative mind, essentially. Thank you for listening to the Obsessive Viewer podcast. This episode was produced and edited by me, Matt Hurt. If you have feedback, thoughts on our episodes, or just want to connect, you can email me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. For more information on this show, including a full archive of our episodes and show notes, visit obsessiveviewer.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please give us a follow on social media and subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. Also, consider rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible to help increase our visibility and grow our community. If you want to support the show and get early access to new episodes, as well as a steady stream of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. For information on more podcasts presented by obsessiveviewer.com, visit obsessiveviewer.com/podcasts. Our theme song is A Little Mad Sometimes by As Good As It Gets. For more of their music, check them out on Spotify and at asgoodasitgetsmusic.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Get up to 2 months of free podcasting service with Libsyn. Check out the show notes for your promo code to get started podcasting today.